Good evening, Broncos country, and welcome to the season's finale of Orange Weekly After Dark. My name is Jason. I'll be with you tonight. As always, please feel free to start posting your comments, questions, anything you want to talk about tonight, as there is a lot to discuss as we head into another long off season after missing the playoffs for another year. Again, lots to talk about. It'll be interesting at how this off season works out. First, sponsored by Centennial State Insurance Agency. Be sure to give them a call for all your insurance needs. They do a great job with finding the best fit for you, which might not necessarily be them, and they'll be straightforward with you with that as well. So feel free to give them a call. And also, before we head into our discussions, be sure to check out all of our social medias and make sure that you are following all of them. This will probably be our last full week of content coming at you for a little while. So be sure to be following all of our social media. Make sure you like and follow all of them so you can stay up to date as we roll out some exciting stuff over the off season, as well as the occasional live show that we'll throw out at you. Robert, welcome. Isn't that Kev Dan's closet? I figured I'd grace it with my presence, give it a good face to go with it to help you guys see a better side of it. So it is, but I'm helping him out a bit. So welcome, though. John, hello. Again, everyone watching, feel free to start posting your questions and comments. And Robert, obviously, the big news that came out today, Elway out as GM. Scared for our current players, 100%. I'm actually not, and I think it's a great move. And here's why: Broncos are officially well into the rebuild, and I do think we're going to start seeing an upswing going into next season, especially with a healthy roster. I think a healthy Broncos roster is miles and miles better than what we finished at this past week against the Raiders. And so I think, having a healthy Von Miller, having a fully healthy Chubb, hopefully having back Philip Lindsay and having him healthy, Cortland Sutton, our entire defensive ends and I'll go through the list later. Just injury after injury. And so I do think our team is much, much better than what we saw the last few weeks of the season. And so I do think we'll start seeing an upswing. That being said, we are still part of this rebuild process. And it's going to take, a full grinding effort from a GM to really put together that final product to start being competitive again for more than just a week-to-week basis or trying to get into the playoffs, but those Super Bowl contenders that we once were. And I think Elway also being on a contract year, I think this is a good move because once we get a new GM, they're going to be able to start thinking long-term as well, not just an immediate fix. I think we're on the way. A new GM is going to be thinking 2 to 3 years down the road, and how can we fit pieces together to make sure in the next few years we set up a team that's going to be successful for a long time again. Where Elway, that would be tough being on a contract year. Obviously, he would want the team to win now, which kind of got himself into this bit of a predicament in the first place, rather than going for a full rebuild a bit sooner and trying to keep up this constant win now mentality that eventually costs us a bit. So I think him stepping out takes away that bit of a win now bias where he's trying to save his GM job and allows a new GM to step in and again think of that long-term picture down the road. Elway also mentioned during his presser today, he mentioned he's 60. He just had his 7th grandkid born today. I think it was today. And so obviously he's starting to think, I can't be working these 80 to 100 hour weeks, day after day. And so he's wanting to take more of that big picture role where he can step back a bit from that day-to-day operational standpoint, be there for the big picture, be there for the big decisions, and make sure that things are kind of still running smoothly, but not necessarily making those day-to-day impact decisions that a GM has to be involved in, especially in the full swing of a rebuild. So honestly, I think it's exciting for the Broncos and for the Broncos players. There are some big contracts to be signed this offseason. The big three being obviously Justin Simmons coming off his franchise tag and had another phenomenal year. Obviously, Shelby Harris is another big name, and Philip Lindsay is a restricted free agent. So it's a bit harder for him to leave, but it is still another contract to consider, especially after he had those back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons his first 2 years, with an injury-filled year this year that kept him well below that mark, but still very dynamic. And Robert, yes, again, to add to that, obviously Patrick and Von Miller are coming down the streamline as well. I know Miller is. I'm pretty sure Patrick is as well for this next year. But after that, you're right. Those are two other big name contracts with two big decisions to make, especially Von Miller, who's been the heart of the franchise for a while now, but is kind of getting to his upper career years, especially now having missed 2 seasons due to injury throughout his career. So big decision there as well. Here's another good question, Daniel. Shouldn't the new GM be able to bring in their own coaches? Yes and no. And maybe if you're in a full, and this is what the Lions are doing, they're totally cleaning house. They fired their GM, they fired coaches, they're getting rid of everybody to completely start over. So once they hire that GM, that process can start. However, if a person higher than the GM, which is John Elway, believes that the coaching staff deserves at least 1 more year, then at that point, the coaches stay. And I do think, however, that this kind of gives a final notice to Vic Fangio and Pat Shurmur and company, because once this GM comes in, they might not make a whole ton of massive changes from the start. I don't expect them to be honest. I think them kind of use this as a bit of an evaluating year, see if they can improve the team and see where that kind of finishes before they start making their own massive changes and putting their own stamp on the franchise. And so I do see this as a bit of a warning signal for Vic Fangio, because he's got basically a new boss to impress now, and to prove that he's the man for the job. And again, personally, I think he'll do a good job next year. I've seen. We'll probably get into discussions later about how he made some more questionable decisions against the Raiders. However, I do think second-year head coach has a ton of experience defensively. He's not going to take a demotion just to do defense with the Broncos. If he's not the head coach for the Broncos, he's not part of the Broncos staff, simply put. So I do think that he will improve with a healthy roster next year. But I do think it is a bit of a last call, if you will, of, hey, we're giving you this last little bit of patience. We understand the roster was in shambles this year. However, we're going to bring in a new GM. Last chance for you to show that you are our coach here. In some ways, it's going to be interesting for Locke too. I think he did show improvement over the last few weeks. However, again, there is still that talk about, not necessarily we need to replace him, but we need to find somebody to challenge him. And so whether that's done in the draft, free agency, or trading, I do believe that we will have another quarterback on the roster who will at least compete for that starting position throughout the season, not just for week 1, but will actually push Drew Lock where, hey, if Lock's game kind of falls, we'll have a better option than we did this year. Keep posting those comments, guys. I'm going to try to start getting into more of them here. John, let's see. You see someone random in the Broncos management or someone familiar to either Fangio or to the team. It's going to be interesting. I'm really curious what direction John Elway decides to go with this. I have seen a lot of comments that I think are highly questionable, bringing in a very first-time GM. I think that's kind of the issues that Broncos country has had over the last few years, is we're complaining about, we keep bringing in new people, we keep bringing in inexperienced people, and now they're wanting an inexperienced GM. A couple of the names I've already seen thrown out, which are not going to happen, are Peyton Manning, to which Elway straight up said that he hasn't received a single call from Manning about this position, so don't hold your breath. And even then, he has 0 GM experience. I've heard Mike Shanahan's name thrown out. I've heard Kubiak's name thrown out. People that are familiar with the Broncos organization and have had successes in their own roles, but have 0 GM experience. And being a GM is an entirely different monster than being a player or being a coach. You're dealing with a whole different set of issues that you're not used to having to deal with in those other positions. So I would go ahead and rule all of those guys out for sure, and any first timer. The only exception that I would say is maybe someone who's really worked with Broncos management for a while, because they get the history, they get the direction we've been going the past 2 years. They see kind of the vision. Might see somebody there. Otherwise, I don't have any good names for you right now. I haven't been able to do a ton of research just today after hearing all this news break. But I wouldn't be too surprised if we try to find somebody who has that GM experience and is able to come in, has been able to piece together a team before, a winning team, a championship level team, is willing to come in to help the Broncos finish off this rebuild, cap it off, and get us back into the very competitive ways that we as Broncos fans are used to having. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, we won't have an answer anytime in the immediate future, but for sure, I would expect it well before the draft. So I would say, venture over the next 2 months or so, we'll be hearing a lot of interesting names thrown out. They'll, different concepts, all that fun stuff. So it will be interesting to see for sure. Let's see. Well, 12-20 is bad, but we are the Jaguars, Jets, and Bengals, and I agree. Obviously, the last few years have not gone the way that we are used to these seasons going. That being said, I do think there are organizations who are far worse shape than the Broncos are in. Again, a 5-11 season for the Broncos, a very injury-riddled season, though. And I think there's a lot of upside from what we're seeing. We're seeing a Drew Lock who has been improving. He even went last game throwing over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, one of his best games in the season. If you go back 2 weeks, if Jerry Jeudy didn't drop 500 passes, then Lock's numbers would have been massively better that game as well. So that's encouraging. Again, I think Vic Fangio is getting better as a head coach. I think with a healthy roster, this is a playoff caliber team, and he has I would argue, when healthy, a defense that isn't quite there, but rivals the Super Bowl 50 defense that we had. Just fitting with his scheme and the way he's able to make that work. I mean, we were competitive the last few weeks when we were out without our top 6 cornerbacks, basically 0 secondary, a makeshift defensive line. I mean, all kinds of issues across the back end there. And we were still having competitive games, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Meanwhile, the Jags are atrocious. The Jets' biggest mistake were winning games this year. And the Bengals, I think they have a phenomenal quarterback in Burrows when he's healthy. But as we can see, without any good offensive line, he's going to be getting hit a ton. And I'll be interested to see how that knee of Burrows heals up. That was a very nasty knee injury he received. They said he's going to make a good recovery and will likely be able to make the start next season. However, again, we saw how bad the Bengals are without their star quarterback, versus other teams like the Saints, who didn't have Drew Brees for a few weeks and were still able to get those wins because the team is so balanced across the board. So yeah, you're right. 12-20 isn't ideal by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think we are worlds ahead of the Jags, Jets, or Bengals. Robert, I touched on this a little bit. You probably asked me this as I was answering it because I'm way behind on comments. I apologize for that. But tune into our other shows this week. Obviously, we have our main show tomorrow. There should be, if not already posted, a post-game podcast coming out, and then we'll have all kinds of other discussions coming up at you. Again, we'll have to dial it back. We won't have our pregame and postgame podcast being thrown out there, but there will be content coming out you through the off season. So, but definitely check out our main show tomorrow. I'm sure we'll have more research done and some more adequate and solid names available that we will be excited to hear about if they're at least interested in this situation. Jose, thanks for joining us. Does contract get affected with this new GM? Always stepping down, downplay, so he's not to blame for letting go of good players and that need contract. I've heard this, and again, I think it's more John Elway recognizing the situation and recognizing that he just simply doesn't. I don't want to word this the wrong way here, but he knows the amount of time it'll take to put in weekly to fully right this ship. And I think he recognizes that he just doesn't have that in him anymore. Keep in mind, before the Broncos, he was the GM of an arena football team. And so he's been the GM for a team for a while now, and that wears on you. All the time that it takes being a player, and then even more so being a GM. Football's been his life for many years. And I think, being a successful arena football GM and being a successful Broncos GM, I would argue, and some might argue against me, but I wholeheartedly believe that Elway is responsible for getting us to 2 Super Bowls and winning one. It wears on a guy. And obviously, like I said, he's got a family that he's getting a little up there in age. He's 60, grandchildren being born. He recognizes that, hey, this might be a fight for somebody else to fully take on. And I think he respects the Broncos organization enough to recognize that. And that is why he's kind of taking this lesser role day-to-day wise. I don't think he's trying to sidestep blame. I don't think that's ever been the kind of guy he is. And so I think that maybe a part of it is getting a fresh voice in to negotiate with some of these players. There might be some jaded negotiations, particularly with the Justin Simmons situation, Philip Lindsay, that type of stuff. And so might be just, here's a fresh perspective, here's a fresh voice. But I think it's more him recognizing the size of the situation, recognizing that he can't faithfully put in that much time while trying to also be a family guy at this point in his life too. And so I think that's more than him trying to just sidestep blame and get away with it. That being said, I do think it's still a contract year for him. Obviously, it's a weird situation with the Broncos right now, not having an owner. And so Joe Ellis would be the one to kind of decide his fate. However, I don't see too much of that changing, especially in this case where now Elway's more of the president of operations type of role versus the day-to-day GM. And so we'll see what happens with that. That will be another interesting headline to look for this through this next year, whether he gets an extension or not. But Juan, I would say this was a bit of a surprise. I don't think any of us saw it coming. I think it was pretty shocking news today for everybody that heard it. I personally, I hadn't seen an inkling of this happening. No rumors about it or anything. So for me, it was a surprise. Time will tell. Again, it's going to be another off season of uncertainty for the Broncos. Not necessarily in a bad way. I think we've had it worse previous years where we had no idea who our quarterback would be. We had no idea who our coach would be. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Robert, I don't think Peyton is interested in any part of that side of the game right now. Not necessarily against the Broncos. I just don't think he wants to do that stuff right now. Maybe down the road. But keep in mind too, again, as far as these management roles, these administrative roles, he doesn't have any experience with that stuff. And so he was without a doubt one of the best quarterbacks to play the game in the history of the NFL. And the way he was able to read defenses, I think, is bar none the greatest. But being able to read a defense on the field is a lot different than knowing how to piece a team together under the cap, short and long term, while keeping negotiations going and all of that stuff that goes into being a GM or even an owner. So I don't think so, at least not anytime soon. I don't see Peyton being any part of a conversation rejoining the Broncos organization. John, appreciate it. We'll be waiting for that list and we'll dissect it before tomorrow's show. Again, keep posting your comments, guys. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. This one, if my brother is not watching, yes, I am Kevin's brother, and I am the better one, better looking. Some say better facial. I'll say better facial hair, better hair in general, better personality, better jokes, better eyes. If you name it, basically, I've got to step up on him. And so I am his brother. And he's in the other room, I think, laughing right now. And the truth has to come out eventually. And so here it is. So thanks for asking the question, Robert. Yes, short answer, I am his brother. Long answer, better in every aspect of the way. And so he's not even here to defend himself right now, which is the other better part. And so I'm just going to keep going on about it because he can't interrupt me, because this is my show. Orange Week After Dark is my thing. And so anyways, I'll stop boring you with all that stuff since I think I've hammered the point home enough, and I don't think anyone would disagree with it. So back to Broncos football. All right, Lincoln, thanks for joining us. A lot of good candidates out there. I think Peyton would be one of them. Elway has said he has not received a single call from Peyton regarding this position. I would be very shocked if Peyton is in any consideration for this. 32-48 since 2016, 4 straight seasons with losing season, 3 of them with 10 or more losses, and 3 of them with the top 10 pick. Not ideal, but again, and I've been kind of alluding to this reference basically all season long for any shows that you see me part of. This is just last week's injuries that the team had. Our wide receiver 1 was out, wide receiver 3, tight end 3, running back 2, right tackle 1, right guard 1, left guard 1, defensive rushers, defensive linemen, nose tackle, cornerbacks 1 through 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, linebacker 3. Keep in mind, we were also without Von Miller, Courtland Sutton for basically the entire season for Sutton. Sutton got in a massive 31 snaps this year. We had 4 different QBs start a game this year due to either injuries or that debacle and farce of a game that we played against the Saints where we didn't have a quarterback. We saw 4 different right tackles. Basically what I'm trying to say is this, this was a ridiculous injury-ridden year. And for a lot of reasons for that, it's a bit of a lost season. It's hard to really evaluate what your team is when you're dealing with that many injuries. And so for that reason, again, what I've been alluding to all season long is the 49ers, where I see a lot of similarities between the two teams in the way that the 49ers started their rebuild. Their first year with Kyle Shanahan, who a lot of our fan base wanted for various reasons, right, wrong, or different. First year, decent season. I think they had about 6-7 wins. Their second year as a coach, as part of that rebuild, they had a very massively injury-filled season, and they went 4-12. At that point, a lot of people were calling for the GM's job. John Lynch, who Broncos fans should be familiar with that name. They were calling for Kyle Shanahan, saying fire him. And then Kyle Shanahan, in his 3rd season with the team, got his roster back, a fairly healthy season that year, and they went to the Super Bowl. And again, I'm not saying we're going to the Super Bowl next year. I would need a lot. We're a bit of ways from that, and I would need to see who we sign this offseason to try to make a claim such as that. But what I am saying is this 5-11 team that we had this season, I think, is a far cry from the roster that we have when healthy. And I think we're going to see, without seeing who we sign this year, I do think we're in the playoffs next year. You can mark it down. I said it here first, whatever, mark this, whatever. Because I do think we're making the playoffs next year, barring another injury-filled year like this. Not saying injury-free. I'm just saying to the size that we had this year, where we had, I think, 15, 16 players on IR by this last week, not to mention all the various injuries we had throughout the year as well. I think that Fangio needs that next year. And with the GM, I think all of those leads to a playoff caliber team. And once you're in the playoffs and you're a playoff caliber team, the 49ers weren't necessarily the best team raw skill wise last year, but they made it to the Super Bowl and gave Kansas City a solid run for their money. And so, you're right, John, these stats aren't great. Keep in mind, 2 of those seasons were with frickin' Vance Joseph, who was absolutely atrocious and nosedive the organization into having to fully go into a rebuild. But my point is, I think this team is a lot better than 5-11 that we saw this year. I think that Fangio is a better coach with a fully healthy roster. I think a second year with Shermer and Drew Lock is going to pay dividends. I think a full offseason with full offseason training for Drew Lock is going to pay dividends. I mean, this was such a weird year where we didn't have any preseason games to work out kinks in the playbook. We didn't have a full offseason for Drew Lock to really work on everything he needed to work on. So I think all that consistency is something that the Broncos have been missing for a while, and will be nice to have. I do think will pay off this next year. Robert, I'm glad I could bring entertainment at work. It's another great quality I have over my brother. Paying, not paying. Yeah, Ryan, thanks for clarifying. I just talked a little bit why I think we should not fire either of those two. All the reasons I said about Vic, where he needs at least another season for us to see. Elway, I think a lot of people are missing the fact that, again, he got us to 2 Super Bowls. And I know the common argument is, well, that was Peyton Manning. Okay, one, who convinced Peyton Manning to come to the Broncos for a smaller salary than the Titans were throwing money at Peyton? And at that time, the Titans and Broncos were pretty even tier teams. It's not like the Broncos were just going to Super Bowls and it was an easy decision. Both Broncos and Titans were kind of on the same tier there. The other thing is that it really does a discredit to Elway and all the draft talent that he brought in, the undrafted talent. It wasn't Peyton Manning that brought in Chris Harris Jr. That was Elway's eye catching an undrafted rookie that would go on and have a phenomenal career for the Broncos. And so I think that's a discredit to what Elway did. And again, I think Elway stepping back and letting another GM come in and handle those very hard day-to-day operational things, I think shows a lot of maturity on his point. I guess point being is I think we are a year removed from any big firings. I think this time next year, if we have another losing season, another season we're out of the playoffs, then yeah, it might be time to start having those tough discussions again. But I think with the current coaching staff and current situation, and the biggest mark that is going to be the hardest thing with this for this franchise to work through is not having an owner. I think that is the hardest thing that they're working through. That's tough for any franchise to work with. So, we can fire all these people all we want, but to me, the biggest issue is not having an owner. And so until that's fixed, that's my biggest question mark about where this franchise is going to head. So we'll have to see what happens with that. There's going to be lawsuits with the Bolin family and all that coming down the pipeline here in this year now, I believe. So there'll be more headlines to pay very close attention to. Again, you could say 4 losses. I could maybe count, if I had to be very critical, I can think of 2. The thing is, again, with the roster he had, bare bones Pickens, we really didn't deserve to win any game. I mean, we were just not in a situation to win at all this year. And so I think 2 things: the fact that he made us as competitive as we were. I mean, there were very few weeks we were blown out this year. Tampa Bay, I mean, you could say the Saints, but that's not on anybody other than the NFL. And, outside of those, I can't think of a time we were absolutely crushed during a week. So the fact that he made us competitive every week, I think says a lot about his coaching. The other thing is the fight that this team still had. I mean, we were hearing about it going to the final weeks where we were on our 6th cornerback, 5th running back, 20th quarterback, whatever. And these guys were still saying that they wanted to fight. They were trying, they were pushing, they wanted to win. We didn't see any quit on this team this year, which I think is, one, a huge credit to the players. It's never easy to play when when you've won 4 or 5 games in the season. But to me, I think it shows credit to the coaching staff. When Vance Joseph was there, you could see when that locker room was fully lost. Nobody was fighting. Nobody wanted to play hard for Vance Joseph. I saw this season a team that still wanted to fight and play hard for their coach. And I think that right there is another reason to keep Vic. Is clearly these players see something in him that drive them, that motivate them, that make them want to be the best they can play. And that is a credit to the coach. And so I think that has something to say. Vance Joseph, 11-21, Fangio, 12-20, first 2 seasons, both first-time head coaches, correct. The other things I would add, though, Vance Joseph was handed a pretty solid football team. Not the best by any means, but still very recently removed from a Super Bowl. They still had a lot of the pieces from that Super Bowl defense, and he completely mismanaged that entire roster, got people to leave, quit, all that fun stuff. Fangio was handed a rebuild roster. And when a coach is handed a rebuild roster, it takes a few seasons for the upswing to happen. I mean, you don't see too many player or teams bounce back once they enter a rebuild to playing in a Super Bowl, the next year. Again, look at the 49ers. Everyone's raving about how great of a coach Kyle Shanahan is. It took him 3 years before they were a good team again. And this year, I think they would have been good too if it wasn't for the injury bug that hit them as well. There were some other coaches I'll have to look up who their first year and first 2 years as a head coach, they had losing records and went on. Kubiak was one of those. Kubiak's first stint as a head coach, I believe, was not a good one. And, it doesn't mean that they're not a good coach. Doesn't mean that they're not going to figure it out. I think that those two situations that you just pointed out, Vance Joseph and Fangio, while on the same team, are completely different scenarios to work through. Because again, different rosters, different motivations, different factors at play. So you're right. Fangio, not a great record his first 2 seasons. But I do think that this season would have been much different if it weren't for the injuries. And I do think next year will be a lot better. All right. Wrapping up here, guys. Matthew, thank you. And thank you for joining us tonight. Everyone, we're going to wrap up here. If you have any final questions, comments at all to post, be sure to throw them out there right now. As unfortunate of a year as it was win-loss wise, again, I do think there's a lot of reasons for hope for the future. And one of those reasons is you guys out there, the ones tuning in every week, contributing to these conversations. You guys are great. You guys make this a ton of fun to do. And that's why we do it here at Orange Weekly. It's a very fan-based driven organization that we have here. We love interacting with you guys. We love these live chats where you guys get to interact. So we're not just talking to you the entire time and you're forced to listen. It's a great way to interact with just other Broncos fans around the world. We've had people all around the world listen to us and join in our conversations. And so thank you guys for all the great things that you have done and for continuing to tune in despite week after week, another loss to discuss, it seems like. And so we do appreciate that. And we hope that you tune in for the rest of the week. We've got obviously our main show tomorrow, excuse me, and our fan appreciation night as well. So be sure to tune in for those. And again, make sure you follow all of our pages, guys, as we throw out more content throughout the off season. So with all of that said, again, thank you guys very much for all of your love and support. Let's see, before I go, if I can name a team you like to have a GM from. If John Lynch is willing to come over from the 49ers and join the Broncos again, I think that would be fantastic in a lot of senses. Not just that I was always a fan of him growing up, but the fact that obviously he has done that rebuild project with the 49ers. He knows how to build a roster. So if John Elway is able to poach him from the 49ers, I think that would be a phenomenal move. So here's to hoping. And if not, we'll see what happens. Again, a very exciting offseason. Be sure to tune into all of our content. And for at least for the time being, for the last time this season, this is Orange Weekly After Dark. I'm Jason signing off. Until next time, go Broncos.